So our first email is from a 14-year-old girl who is doing real love pretty darn well on her own. Little help from mom now and then, but this one's her. She says, "My mom's at work right now, and my sister and I, my little sister Helen, who's 7, she's supposed to be doing her learning time. Um, Actually, we both are. I'm on the computer, and she's supposed to be reading books. She has to read for an hour, and she's resisting me. No, mom's away, and little sister's resisting her big sister. Shocking. When I told her what time it would be when she needed to be done, which is very clever of big sister, instead of saying nagging, 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 just saying you have to be done with an hour's worth of work by X time. So when I told her that, she snapped at me and she told me that she was going to stop 15 minutes early. I just shrugged my shoulders and went back to what I was doing. That's actually very smart. I wish more parents would do that. If people don't learn by teaching, then you let them learn by consequences. If you keep teaching when people aren't listening, that's called nagging. So then you just let consequences teach. And that's what this smart 14-year-old big sister is doing. Instead of forcing her, you simply informed her. Oh, this is brilliant. You're a great parent at 14. You must be feeling more loved. And it's very cool that your mother's shown you a better way. You continue. I then set a timer when she decided to start reading for an hour. After she finished reading her first book, which was really very little, she finished it in about 4 minutes. So, yeah, it must be a small book. She started to complain to me, and she asked if she could do her letters for 55 minutes instead of an hour. Can't you just hear the attitude? I don't want to do this. The 14-year-old isn't having any of this. This is great. The 14-year-old said, I told her that if our mom said she has to do it for an hour, then that's what she has to do, and that it's not my decision to change how long she has to read. So I went back to what I was doing. But then I realized something. It's not my job to control her into getting her learning done at the right time when our mom is gone. All I have to do is report to our mom later on when she gets home. Honey, you're a genius. You are left with the job of seeing to it that the instructions were being followed best you could, but you didn't become the boss of your sister. Brilliant. You continue. So I turned the timer off and I looked at her and I told her this. I said, it's none of my business whether or not you finish your work. It's my job to let mom know what happens when she's gone. You're good. So I could tell her when she gets back that you resisted in doing your learning, and that's all I need to do. I don't need to tell you what to do or when to stop doing what you're doing. Then our mom can figure out what she wants to do about it when she gets home. That's it. So I'm going to leave you alone now to do whatever you need to do. This is perfect. You are teaching, not controlling. You are seeing to it that your sister understood accountability. I'm just winging it here, but another thing that older siblings can do is when a kid is behaving badly when the parents are not there, is just get out a smartphone and record the behavior of the sibling. Because when mom gets home, what do we hear? We hear these endless arguments. He hit me. No, he didn't. He yelled at me. He did this. No, he didn't. So it is a guarantee that if you hold a video camera on a sibling who is behaving badly, their behavior will change. That's called accountability. You say, after I said that, she looked at me and said, no, you won't. You won't tell her that, because if you do, I might lose my game time. This little girl's pretty good too. The older sister says, we have a rule that if we don't do our learning, or if we complain about doing our learning, we don't get to play on the computer, which is our game time. So she's bargaining and trying to manipulate you with guilt. Oh, How could you tell mom that I didn't do what I was supposed to? Because then I would lose my game time and I would feel terrible. And of course, if I feel terrible, so will you. The older sister says, "Oh, yeah, I will. I'll tell her. If you just do your learning and you don't complain or whine or stop or pout, you will very likely get your game time because as long as you do your learning, there's no problem." So this 14-year-old is already actually far more courageous than most parents. She says, at 2:45, after complaining and pouting and whining to me for 25 minutes instead of reading, she said, "Well, I've been reading for almost 9 minutes now out of 60 minutes that were assigned." And the older sister said, "Yes, you have been reading for 9 minutes, and if you hadn't spent all this time complaining, you would be almost done by now. But instead, you decided to complain, and now you still aren't very much closer to being done than when you started." I am speechless at how this older sister is handling this perfectly. The older sister says, "Is this what I should have done, or is there a better way?" I wish all parents would listen to this. I doubt there could be a better way than you did it. The idea is to love and teach and then hold accountable. And that's exactly what you did. So you're entitled to feel very good about how you did here, assuming, of course, that your tone was kind. We'll just assume that. Beautiful work. Here's a woman who's been doing real love really only for a relatively short period of time. And she caught on very quickly to the fact that she has choices she never saw before. She has spent an entire life as a people pleaser, and so she's always felt trapped when people wanted something from her. So recently, she went on a date, and there was a party, and she said he seemed like a really nice guy, and they were getting along. And then she said he started quizzing me about Jesus and salvation. And she answered several of his questions, but then he started getting aggressive about exactly what did she believe and why did she not believe the way he believes. The religious part is irrelevant. What matters is she just didn't like the tone of the conversation. Don't get distracted by religion. It could have been by anything. Could have been by politics. Could have been by anything else. So she caught on pretty quickly that this guy wasn't listening to her, like at all. And having read the dating book, she understood that listening's a pretty important part of loving. So she touched him on the shoulder and got up and left the table, exactly as she would have done had she been going to the restroom. And he assumed very likely that she was going to the restroom. But instead, she just left the restaurant. I'm laughing my head off as I'm hearing this because this is great. Because when you're leaving a date early, what do you get? You get to play 20 questions. Well, but I didn't mean that, and I didn't mean that, and I didn't mean this, and what did you mean by it? She wouldn't have gotten away for another 30 minutes. So she just left the restaurant. She got 2 blocks away. She sat down on a bench, relaxed herself, and she texted him and she said, "Good night." And then she blocked his number so she didn't get to hear his response. That's not in the dating book, but it really should be. The whole idea of dating is to find out whether somebody is willing to learn, willing to listen, willing to care about you. This guy proved that he wasn't willing to care about her before the appetizers arrived. So why suffer through the rest of the meal? Poof, she just got up and left. Some people would say, well, it would have been better to explain to him why. But I'm here to tell you, he would have grilled her to death. He was already grilling her about Jesus. You think he wouldn't grill her about him or her? She left. Date over. So she spent all of, 20 minutes on the date instead of an hour and a half and numerous explanations afterward, and who knows how many callbacks, and maybe we can make this work. And the idea is to get to know the word no faster. Well, she accomplished that beautifully. New subject. Somebody said, tonight, my ex-husband texted me a vulgar sexual message that was obviously meant for somebody else. He quickly realized what he did, and he called me and left a voicemail that said, delete it before reading it, which is pretty much impossible because you have to look at the phone to delete the message. And she, by that time, of course, already read the message. And this is what I texted him. She said, I erased it, but unfortunately not quick enough before I read it. The ex responded, oh, sorry about that. I really mean it. I really am sorry. She responded, you could avoid accidents like this by paying attention to what you're doing. I realize it's very tempting to teach ex-partners, especially since they've been doing this to you for years. Never, ever try to teach him anything. I'm speaking to her now. He's already proven thoroughly over many years of marriage that he's utterly incapable of learning. That's why you divorced him. So it probably felt good to get in a jab or two here, but come on, he's never learned before. Why try to teach him now? She says, later in the evening when I got home, my first text to him just didn't feel complete. So she said, disregard my last text. What I really wanted to say but didn't is that you're saying you're sorry doesn't erase what I read from my mind. She wasn't satisfied with teaching it once. She decided to stand up in front of the board with a piece of chalk. And she said, and I don't want to see texts like this again. It was vulgar. And what if our daughter had had my phone and seen that, which she, often does, as in has my phone? Honey, you're just digging the hole deeper. You're about halfway to hell now. It's getting worse. You're teaching him again, and you're trying to make him feel guilty on top of it. You have a tendency, almost an irresistible urge to correct him, and you do the same often to other people, and rarely do they like it. You've gotten yourself in trouble with this more times than I can count, and I'm sure I only know about some of them. You said, I'm glad I saved my daughter. After we make a really big mistake, we love our justifications. I saved my daughter from being exposed to inappropriate subject matter. Well, your daughter didn't see it. Good for you, but that doesn't mean that you needed to tell any of this to your ex. Just ridiculous. She continues, still to him, texting him. She's not done. She's still texting this guy. I'm hoping that you choose to learn something from this rather than, forgive me, but I know him and he doesn't listen. And I know her and she can't resist speaking. You ever watch people when they're in a foreign country and they're speaking to somebody who, Americans do it more than anybody else that I know of. They're in France and they say something to a French person who goes, of course, I shouldn't pick French people because they would act like they didn't understand even if they did. But you're in a foreign country and you speak and the person obviously doesn't understand you. So the American speaks much louder and slower, as though if they spoke slowly enough, the other person would learn to speak English in the intervening time. Honey, that's what you're doing with him. I'm hoping you choose to learn something from this rather than feeling shameful or guilty, which helps nobody. So she's further justifying her mistake. Then she ends with, acknowledge that you received this. This is this is priceless and actually fairly average communication between exes. So you taught him again, and then you finished it off with an order. I'm just saying, this urge to correct people is not helping you, and certainly isn't going to help you with him. I got a second email, though, and she said, you know, you're right. I do that. I've been seeing that more, but more often I see it after the fact. And I tend to do it the most with my ex. Last night, I was quite disturbed by seeing his text. It was vulgar and surprising to see coming from him. I've never known him to say things like that. I went into fear about a bunch of different things, and my skin crawled just having that message on my phone. So listen up, honey, because this may seem subtle to many people, but I think you can get this, as well as the people who are listening, because we've all done something similar. When you say my skin crawled, you're creating unnecessary drama. You couldn't just say it was an inappropriate message and I deleted it. That's just a fact and we're done. No, it was so inappropriate, my skin crawled. My blood boiled. I could feel my gallbladder shift its position in the liver. This is really unnecessary drama. You used vulgarity and sex and deviation from the past as justifications for your horror and your offense. Wrong. Then you acted victimized over something that was literally nothing. Unless your phone works a whole lot different from mine, I can look at who sent me the message and delete it without reading it. I think you have the first few words, don't you? In the line. But you look at the first few words. If you can't tell in the first few words that it's a vulgar sexual message, then you're not very observant. I just delete them without reading them. And last, you gave up your happiness over nothing. Now, although I've been getting a little humor over this, we all do this kind of thing. We find something to be offended about. I'm not just laughing at her, although I have been laughing at her, but it's not just her. I'm laughing at all of us. We all do this. It's like sometimes we're just looking for something to be offended about instead of just letting it just sail on by. If we stop and respond to it, it just makes it much worse. New subject. Here's somebody who says, people often say things that are inconsiderate or wrong. What do we do? Is it usually best simply to state what they did because otherwise they'd never know? For example, just now, trying to see, is this them speaking or me? This person was just saying, what do you do when somebody says something inconsiderate or wrong? My response, because sometimes my response is I write in little code in shorthand and later I don't understand it, which is kind of embarrassing. We don't understand your own writing, especially when it's typed. It's usually best to simply state what they did so that they know. So example, you might say to somebody, just now, like to a partner, you might say to your husband, just now you were condescending to me. I have little doubt that you did it unconsciously, but you did do it. That's not a discussion. And I am still weak enough that it affects me in a negative way. I feel small when you refer to me in a condescending way. And when the person then comes back with, well, I didn't mean to, you just stop them. You say, it was condescending. We're not having a discussion about it. It was, and I'm just letting you know that it affects me negatively. Well, I didn't mean, I'm just telling you. See how I stop all the arguments? Because if you don't stop them, they will argue, justify, defend till they're dead. In fact, I said this just the other day to somebody, and they said, what's the difference between, this is me, Stating facts like that and acting like a victim. Easy. Emotional energy. If I say to somebody, the way that you spoke to me just now is mm, moderately snotty, that's almost exactly what I said to somebody. And they looked at me and started to justify, and I said, snotty, just telling you. You can do whatever you want to with it. But I said it just like this. I didn't say, you're snotty to me. That's not stating a fact. That's acting like a victim. That's the difference. We're always entitled to tell somebody what they're doing to us and how it affects us, or sometimes even state what they're doing for their benefit. But as soon as we get a tone, we're not informing anymore. Now we're acting like a victim, and now the conversation just turns to mud. This is from a woman who is socially really awkward. She finds interacting with people very difficult. Like even just the simplest conversations, anything more than 2 sentences just gets her all anxious. She works at a nursing home serving food to the residents, which is pretty close to perfect for her because she doesn't have to have long conversations with people. She just drops the plate in front of them and moves on to the next one. But she wrote and she said, I had a wonderful moment connecting with one of the residents, Nellie, as I was clearing the tables at the end of the shift. I don't know this woman's story, but she was clearly distressed about something. She wasn't eating. She was looking longingly out the window. She was on the verge of tears, and she was saying something about another resident that I couldn't quite make out. My first impulse was to turn away and keep stacking dishes, as I felt that I had very little to give to her. But I felt drawn to try. That's very cool. To at least give it a shot. I mean, what do you got to lose by trying one sentence? That's a great thing. Just try. There are lots of circumstances where we're not sure what to say. Well, if you wait until you're positive what to say, you're never going to say anything because you're never going to get the practice in learning what to say. You're going to wait for perfect. That's like, I'll never swing at a baseball until I can hit a baseball perfectly. Well, how would you learn to hit a baseball perfectly until you swung at some and missed a lot? If you miss 70% of the time, you get into the Baseball Hall of Fame. No kidding. So it's expected that we'll fail. So she tried. When we feel uncomfortable or less than competent, we tend to do nothing, and then we never learn anything. So we stay uncomfortable and less than competent, which is kind of, well, dumb. Understandable, but a kind of living death. She continues, so I went over and I looked her in the eye, which is a remarkably good thing to do. And as she spoke to me, she looked fearful, but longing at the same time, like she wanted to connect with me, but didn't know how. Eventually, she broke down in tears with this expression on her face of, finally, somebody is paying attention to me. Well, now, how cool is that? Because you decided to take a few seconds to pay attention to her. I reached out, you continue, and touched her on the shoulder, something that I normally feel very hesitant to do. And I can tell you, knowing her, she really does. Unbelievably brave act. It's something that I've never been able to do with anybody. She cried some more and said to me over and over, God bless you. It was as if in a single moment her entire world went light and calm. And I hadn't done anything except look her in the eye, listen to her, and touch her on the shoulder. Oh, that's an entire course. That's the whole marriage book. It just showed me how little she's ever had anybody genuinely care about her, and that I was able to help her, even for a moment, brought me peace and strength. It was feeling of knowing deep inside, this is what makes the struggle worth it. Yeah, no kidding. We have opportunities all around us every day to do things just like this. Look how many seconds that took. 15, 10, and it changed the life both of the giver and the receiver. So why don't we take these opportunities? Well, lots of reasons. I'll give you three that I can think of off the top of my head. First, we've never had people love us in that way. So we don't know what to do. Two, we're uncomfortable that we're going to screw it up. Um, and three, we're afraid of looking stupid. We're afraid that other people will think badly of us. What's the solution? To do what this lady did, who has a remarkable social phobia. Just do it and see what happens. Experiment with just simply smiling at people. They've done experiments, social experiments at colleges with they've commissioned students to just stand on the street corner and not smile at people and count the smiles of the people as they go by, and then smile at people and count the smiles of people as they go by, and they go up by 500%. They've experimented with what will happen if you just stop people on the street and say, "Would you mind taking a picture of me and my friend? And could I take a picture of you and my friend?" And people just blossom at the attention. Anything that involves people, that shows you care about them, where you look into their eyes, they respond remarkably well. New subject. Here's somebody who says, something came up between my girlfriend Karen and myself, and I want to get some clarity. I made plans to see a friend this Tuesday for a good portion of the day. Tuesday is normally a day off for me, and typically I spend it with my girlfriend, Karen. I decided to take some time to spend with my friend, not the whole day, but some of the day, but I didn't tell her. Well, that would be a mistake. When you have a partner, you don't make decisions anymore, that's what partnerships are, that affect her without talking to her first. Partners just don't do that. You can even tell her that you really want to do that, that you really do want to spend part of the day with your friend, but you need to involve her in it. You need to tell her first. You continue. Normally, I would run it by her just to let her know or to see if she'd rather do anything with me first. Seems like there was some confusion about this, and I didn't want to make her wrong. And recently, I got pretty upset when I expected her to come over one night, and she had other plans. Well, same deal here. She should have told you first, just as you should have told her first before you made plans with your friend. No difference. Partners don't make decisions alone when they affect the other person. I choose my own socks, but I don't choose how I spend my time. I involve my partner. Now, sometimes involve doesn't necessarily mean work the decision together. Sometimes it doesn't mean get permission. So for example, I'll just get up in the morning and I'll say to Donna, I'll be making phone calls from 7:15 to 10:45. Well, now she knows exactly what I'm doing, doesn't she? Because I've made those appointments all during the day before. It took a long time to make those appointments. And I don't call Donna every single time I make an appointment and go, hang on just a second, I've got to talk to Donna. It would become really kind of annoying. She's on the phone, she's outside, she's doing errands, but she knows what I'm going to be doing in a day. Every day, she knows where I'll be. You continue. I started controlling her, and I didn't want to enable the same thing this time, so I decided to use my time how I wanted. I set a time limit with my friend so that Karen and I would have some time to spend on Tuesday. Anyway, she's got pretty upset when I told her this, saying that I didn't want to spend time with her. Now, this might seem like a fine distinction, but it's not. Your partner is your primary priority. And yet, that does not mean you do everything she wants all the time. For example, my primary priority is my partner, Donna. But right now, instead of spending time with her, I'm talking to you. So even though she is my overall primary priority, mm, she knew about this time. She knew that we'd be doing a video chat, and part of it is talking to you. But she knows ahead of time what I'll be doing. And if she had a huge need, like she wanted me to do something with her right now, I would stop talking, like as in now, and I would go do whatever it was that she wanted to do. Partners make decisions together and they also don't abuse this power. If my partner were to be constantly saying, in order for you to prove that you care about me, you can't spend time with anybody but me. Well, that's not partnering. That's taking a hostage. She would be controlling me. I wouldn't be who I am anymore, and we wouldn't have a partnership. So see, it's not a fine distinction. My partner's always first, but there are individual times when I spend time with other people. You continue. I felt like she was being pretty controlling, but I'd like to know if I did anything wrong or I could have been more loving. Just what we talked about. And she was controlling on the occasion that she agreed to spend time with her friend and didn't tell you. You were wrong not to inform her, and the loving response from her when you made that mistake would have been to say, I really would have appreciated knowing this before you finalized your plans. Because when you share decisions with me, I feel much more like a partner. Her being upset with you about this mistake was her selfish mistake. So you both made mistakes here. You were both wrong. You continue. We didn't talk about it too much while she was angry, so that's a step in the right direction. I'd like to speak with her about it later after she's cooled down. Well, one possible way for you to talk to her about it is to have her watch this, watch the video chat. I later got a second email from this man. He said, so you're saying that it's wrong of her to expect to spend time with me because that's controlling. Not quite. Because you two are partners, you did make an agreement to share decision making. So she does have a right to expect that you will spend time with her when she needs it, but not all your time, not demanding your time until you become a slave. But the instant she became upset, she was wrong because that was unloving. It's always about the loving. It's not about divvying up time. It's not about details. It's not about notification or permission. It's always about love. You say, however, because she's my partner, I was wrong in not sharing that information with her before making plans. Yes, I'm not wrong, you conclude, that I'm spending time with a friend instead of her. No, you're not, as long as you inform her. And she doesn't have a clearly more emergent need. New subject. A woman says, my husband, Robert, often turns away from me right in the middle of a conversation with me to watch TV or to play around on Facebook. You told me to point it out to him when he does that because he didn't even realize he was doing it. So I started doing that. Right in the middle of his talking to me, he would turn to answer people on Facebook. So I pointed it out, and then he tries to defend himself, or what he would call explain himself. I love the words we use to cover up what we do. Like, I wasn't angry. I actually heard this just the other day. I wasn't angry. I was annoyed. And they said it to me like this, and that's very different. And I'm looking at him and going, I said, no. I said, let me see if I can match your tone. No, it's really not. We think that if we say things with enough confidence, they become true. Uh, so he tries to explain himself, and I said, sweetie, I'm not asking you to stop or trying to tell you what to do. I'm pointing out that you are sending the message that social media or television is more important to you than me, and that what I have to say doesn't really matter to you. And I know this man, he does this kind of thing all the time. That's the message I get, she says. I don't like it much, so I'm just telling you how it affects me. Perfectly said. And you have to say it every single time he does it. That sounds almost annoying, but it's necessary, because if you point out half the times that he's looking at social media or television in the middle of a conversation, then you just confuse him, because the other half of the times that you don't point it out, he hears you saying that it's okay. So what he hears you saying, okay, not okay, okay, not okay, and he's left going, I don't get it. You were okay with it yesterday. If we're not consistent, we don't convey the message that we want to. You say, at first he said with body language that he didn't like me saying anything about this. Well, of course he didn't. He's been telling you that he doesn't care about you for a very long time. But now it's becoming harder to deny, which he is trying to do. He's trying to deny it, which tells you some important things. One, he knew that he was being rude, or it wouldn't have bothered him for you to say something about it. And two, he really doesn't care much about connecting with you, because no matter how many times you say it, he does it anyway. You say then he would turn off the TV in a kind of victim sort of way. She would say to him sometimes, you just watch television instead of right in the middle of a conversation. So she continues and said, well, then he would just go to the turn the television off and say, okay, then I'll never watch television again for the rest of my life. Which, by the way, in case you're curious, is what a 4-year-old would do. He thinks he's going to punish you by him not watching television. All he's showing is that he's an enormous victim and not willing to learn. You say again, I repeated calmly, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just telling you that your actions reveal what is important to you. Good for you, and you have to do it every time. You say, this isn't going to be easy for him, for sure, but I feel better that way than hoping that he'll just give me little crumbs of attention from time to time. He has not gotten to the point where he sees the necessity to be attentive to me, and he may never. Each morning he goes to work, and when he does, he asks if I want anything, on his way to work, what I want, and then he kisses me goodbye. And that sounds good, but then later, if I dare to say anything about his being inattentive, like watching television or Facebook, he brings up those two actions. He says, well, I ask you what you want, and I give you a kiss every morning, which takes him all of 15 seconds, and he's going to do it on the way out the door, and it doesn't interrupt what he was doing. You continue. That's information for me. And I could take it that I'm not worthy and go all victim on this, but I'm choosing to continually tell myself that there are people who love me who would not do that. And then she named several people. So there's no threat to me. I'm just learning more about his capacity. Bless your heart, honey. This is all information about him. His kissing you goodbye in the morning is just a social custom, and he does it so that he can bring it up later to prove that he's loving. Real caring involves almost invariably giving something up, like time, attention to social media, and so on. So now, one, you just keep loving him as well as you can. No unkindness ever, no matter what he does. Two, you point out when he's ignoring you, as you're doing now. And three, you just keep gathering information about whether he's willing to learn anything about loving you. And then you decide whether you want to stay in a relationship where somebody doesn't pay you any attention. Here's a mother who says, I need some advice. With our daughter, 17, we made a rule that she could not date exclusively until she had left our home. So till she was done with high school and moved out. We gave in early when she was 15 or 16 to lots of tears and whining, and as a result she got pregnant and was involved in some other heartaches that I'm not going to go into, and I don't want to go through them again. It was a disaster to let our daughter date date exclusively before the time that we had told her. Well, you've learned. And sometimes the price is very high. 17-year-old kids are not ready for exclusive dating. If you have any doubt about that, look around you at the adult married people you know. Most 50-year-olds are not ready for exclusive dating. So 17-year-olds certainly are not. Now the issue is, you say, our son, who's 16, has announced that he has a girlfriend. And we said that he can't date her exclusively. So for every date he goes on with her, he has to go on a date with a different girl. His response was, no way. He's giving us a lot of flack and saying, well, how come the rule is different for him than for his sister? So what do I tell him? This is easy. You say, we made a mistake with your sister. That should be pretty obvious that we made a mistake with your sister because of the disaster that followed. So now we are smarter with you than we were with her. Aren't you glad that we're learning? In case you're wondering, he won't be glad that you're learning. The tone is everything. You don't be irritated. You just say, hey, we screwed up and now we're smarter. My older kids used to say many, many years ago that I treated the younger ones differently. And I always responded, well, I'm smarter now. Aren't you happy? Because of the finality and gentleness of my tone, no kid said that to me more than once. Not one kid. We're here to learn. Anybody who says that they treat all their kids the same is admitting to being incredibly stupid and learning nothing as they raise their children. We're here to gather information and get smarter. It's regrettable that we have to often learn the important lessons with the older kids, but, well, there it is. The alternative is to not learn anything. We've talked about raising kids, and we've talked about marriages and partnerships and people not listening and all that, and it sounds like a lot of different subjects, but it's not. It really all comes down to doing what we talk about every time. You can't memorize answers in these chats. It's not my goal to solve people's individual problems. We solve our own as we find unconditional love, as we trust the love of the people who give it to us, as we remember it so it lasts longer than 3 minutes. And the greatest rewards of all by far come as we learn to share love with the people around us. It works. We'll see you in a week.